And let's meet our panelists. First, we have Chung, the Director of Sales at ActiveProspect. Young, tell us about what you do over there.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Young, as Kevin mentioned. I run the sales department at ActiveProspect. My background is a little unique. I started off in business intelligence and data analytics, and over time got tired of building reports and wanted to have more skin in the game, so I got involved in search engine marketing, where I ended up managing a team of lead generators. During that time, I learned a lot about the marketing inputs that lead to quality, right? The traffic sources going into the leads are what determine the quality of those leads. And I became a customer of ActiveProspect for compliance reasons, specifically for TCPA compliance. And fate would have it, I've been able to grow with the company for the last couple years, and I'm extremely excited to hopefully add some insight into this panel. Thank you.
I'm sure you will, Young. Thank you very much. And moving on to Kelly. Kelly Shar, Manager of Third-Party Marketing at Angi. Kelly, could you tell us a little about what you do over there at Angi and about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. As Kevin said, I'm the Manager of Third-Party Marketing at Angi. There, I'm responsible for growing and maintaining our largest lead volume, lead generation partners, as well as revenue. So making sure they're high quality, optimizing accounts, and working on complex partner, like product builds, as well as, working with different partners. A lot here.
That's great. Thank you, Kelly. And finally, our legal authority, Stephen Turner. Stephen's partner at Lewis Brisbois Bisgaard Smith. Stephen, tell us a little bit about your experience and expertise. Maybe you could give us some examples of what we're going to be talking about today as well.
Sure, Kevin. I'm happy to be here. But before I do that, in all seriousness, I do have something serious to say. Three of you have asked me if, in fact, I was the chaperone for this afternoon's presentation, and that one more person asked, they're going to be trouble. That's a little bit of a joke. No one's asked. They could have, though, and in some ways it's appropriate that I think of myself as a chaperone in this context. I am the chair, the national chair of my firm's Consumer Litigation Defense Practice Group. Have handled very many TCPA cases, and most of those are class actions. And I'm really very, very pleased to be here. So there's just a few points I would like to make as we get started.
This is where it gets scary. So everybody, it is Halloween season, get ready.
So just this week, I was reading a little blurb in emails that I get and about a settlement in Massachusetts. The class was just made up of people in Massachusetts. And the settlement was $14 million for violation of the TCPA. And that is a very, very significant amount of money. And it was described as the largest settlement ever in Massachusetts. That was by the class counsel, so we could perhaps should check the source or think about the source. But that pales in comparison to some recent verdicts that have come out. And one, there was a case, a friend of mine, a very able attorney in Northern California, was defending a debt collector in that case. And the case went to trial, and the class had been certified. The verdict was, I believe, $276 million for violations of the TCPA. And added to that was $78 million in attorney's fees. And that's beyond troublesome. That's shocking. But it pales in comparison with a verdict that came out in Oregon in the recent past, in which the verdict, I don't have it exactly, but it was about $950 million. And there were post-trial motions that gave me pause as an attorney. An argument was made which was rejected by the court because the court said it was made too late. That would make my blood run cold. So in any event, there's very serious business that we have to do, that TCPA compliance is critical in your industry. It is absolutely essential. And even if a case pled as a class action can be settled on an individual basis, there's going to be a premium paid. The damages for TCPA are per occurrence. There's no cap, obviously. It's $500 on an individual basis, $1,500 on $500 for negligent violation and $1,500 for intentional violation. I have a case settled just recently, a very successful man. I'm not going to even describe the industry he's in Southern California. The case was pled as a class, and we tried to persuade class counsel that, one, we were going to win, and we very well might have, I think. But if we lost, there was no insurance, and there was going to be no way to collect. So counsel said, sure, that's fine, but you're going to have to pay a premium to settle on an individual basis. And that case was settled for 6 figures plus. I'll just let it go at that. It's confidential settlement. All told, between defense costs and the settlement, a great deal of money was paid on this individual basis. Almost all of the money that was paid in settlement was paid by way of attorney's fees. So clearly, and I've babbled on here, the problem is very, very significant. So the question becomes, what can you do? So I think that the starting point is the people you deal with, the people you work with, have to know that this is an extremely serious problem, and that there is no one get out of jail free card, and close is not only not a cigar, it's an invitation to a class action settlement. So the people who work for your companies need to know that it is absolutely crucial that they comply with the TCPA. And the second point I would make, it was just a few points I have, is about the do not call list. The do not call list is sacrosanct. You just has to be followed, and there is just no other alternative, so long as the person called, doesn't have written consent to receive the contact. So that would be the third point, is you have to pay attention to the do not call list. You have to focus on it fanatically. And then the fourth point that I would make is that you have to comply strictly with the TCPA. I had a case in Missouri, an entertainment company, in-house counsel drafted texts that were sent, and arguably the text complied with TCPA, and arguably they did not. A slight variation on that, a slight modification, and they would have complied with the TCPA. And so that resulted in a huge, huge litigation that is still ongoing. So those would be the points that I would stress at the beginning. If in fact and I have 2 more points, and then I'll wrap it on up.
Go ahead. You're doing
is that if you're dealing with people who you believe to be independent contractors, it is imperative that you do everything possible to maintain that status. You cannot, and it's going to be driven on a state-by-state basis. It'll be determined on a state-by-state basis, but you have to comply with the law to the letter. I've had cases where my client told me, no, they're independent contractors, and that's a defense. That's one problem, is that you're already in the lawsuit when you're making that argument. And secondly, it might have been true and it might not have been true. We'll just let it go at that, as to whether or not they are independent contractors. I think I talked about strict compliance with the TCPA. The way I would think about it, and I talk to my clients about it, if the TCPA is amended or modified and it required that certain forms be written with a 2.5 pencil, it is imperative that you all use a 2.5 pencil. Do not use a 2.0 pencil, because that's a violation, would be a violation. And then I guess for my last piece of advice, I'm going to draw upon a long time ago, a television show that maybe even many of you might remember, is Hill Street Blues. And the late actor Michael Conrad, who played Sergeant Phil Esterhaus, would every morning the show would begin, and there would be the roll call, and there would be the instructions for the day and places to be concerned and issues to think about. And as the officers were getting up to leave, at every episode, Michael Conrad, Sergeant Phil Esterhaus would say, as they're getting ready, people, be careful out there. So my last piece of advice is be careful out there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Stephen. And I think that although what he speaks about is pretty scary, I had dinner with Stephen last night. He's a lovely man. And
Well,
he was
you
not
were
in
blind,
this,
so I
yeah,
had
he
to
was
be
not in
lovely.
that vibe at all last night. And even though his Dodgers were getting beat up pretty badly, so that was a thing. I know. Sorry about that. Kelly and Young, considering what Stephen just talked about and the real consequences that he's speaking about, let's start with you, Kelly. How do you mitigate risk where you are at Angi and what you guys are doing over there?
Yeah, TCPA compliance is really important, the acceptance and compliance of it, because we are not the end consumer of the data. We need the consumer, or the consumers going through the flow to know that they're going to be matched with our service professionals, and the data is not going to end with us. We need it to be really straightforward, concise, and TCPA is ever changing, so the way we kind of combat this at Angi is making sure we do site audits, review, the sites that partners are sending to us, looking at the language and randomly auditing them because things can change. With that being said, also there's some risks. If they don't have the language that's in our agreement, we have to make sure that it's there. There's also risks if they shrink the language, where it's placed on the page is super important. We need it to be before the submit or really close to the submit button, so we know that the consent is there and it was given. Another kind of risk is with mobile, because there's less square footage on a cell phone. When a consumer scrolls, they might miss the language. So just really making sure we work with our mobile partners really closely. And then another way we combat TCPA is working with ActiveProspect and having trusted form certificates for our partners. We're working on compliance and mandating this for partners to make sure that, at the end of the day, we're covered with all of the partners that we work with.
That's great. Thank you very much, Kelly. I appreciate that. Young, you have that consumer data. So how are you protecting that resource?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you, Kelly, for giving us those insights into your TCPA process. It sounds like it's a rigorous process that is iterated upon, right? You're constantly improving to comply with the changing regulatory environment. And also thank you for, mentioning trusted form. That is, you're a wonderful partner of ours, and we're glad that is the backbone and the foundation of your documentation of consent. And also thank you for Stephen. That was terrifying. It sounds like it's just a minefield out there if you're not careful. And I would just start by saying, if you're reaching out to Stephen after you are in hot water, probably not the time to reach out to him, right?
It's a little late.
Whoa, you can reach out.
But his mortgage wants you to reach out to him, that's for sure.
Exactly. I mean, the goal is to reach out to legal experts such as, Stephen, I see Eric Trauman in the crowd. Reach out to the experts first, right? As you are building your defensible TCPA position, because it's all about creating a process and being proactive. And, as Angi is doing, having an iterative process. So I just want to lead off with that. But before I kind of jump into the weeds here, I'd like to mention, we've mentioned trusted form already, and I'm going to be saying it a lot. So just to level set what trusted form is going to be important here. So please bear with me, it's going to take a moment. But trusted form is our compliance solution. I like to think of it as a Carfax for every single lead that is generated. So whenever there's disagreement, saying a consumer says, hey, I didn't fill this out, you can say, well, yes, you did actually, and here's a video replay to back it up that you actually filled it out. So we fill a need, and the story of how this came about is actually quite old. Our founder and CEO, Steve Rafferty, 17 years ago, he was in this lead system, and he said, wow, my buyers are purchasing leads, and they're just going on the word of the vendor. It's either a good lead or a bad lead, either it works or it doesn't, but there was no kind of certification or transparency in that. So he created Trusted Form, and from there, over the last 17 years, we've partnered with virtually every publisher out there, and as you are purchasing data, you could say, hey, I'd like trusted form, which is a video replay backing it up, and then you can work with us to make sure you have that protection. So kind of that PSA behind us, I'll kind of jump in here. So how documentation of consent works, where we fit, is in front of your sales process. So before that data or that lead makes it into your sales process, we make sure that it's a compliant lead. We can run a page scan to make sure your approved consent language exists on the page of the lead that you're purchasing, a video replay backing it up for manual audit purposes. So we do all of this before that lead enters your system, and as an added bonus, you can reject it in real time and not pay for that data. So it's an added bonus there. And as our CEO, and once again I'm mentioning Steve Rafferty, when you can get express written consent, and Steve, I'm going to lean on you here, I believe when you can get express written consent and can document it, that supersedes any DNC list. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we like to refer to that as the marketer's golden ticket. Once you have express written consent and you can document it and you've stored that video replay, it opens your business up to all kinds of useful technology to help you acquire customers more effectively and profitably. Right? You could use ActiveProspect to enhance that data, Drips to have conversational texting, Convoso for your dialer, things like Retriever for intelligent call tracking. All of these amazing technologies that have been developed to help you sell better to these consumers are at your fingertips, and you can do so compliantly. And so there's a lot of doom and gloom with the TCPA, but at the same time, I just want to, impress upon you that a compliant lead is a good lead, right? And by focusing on compliance, you can actually accelerate the growth of your company by leveraging technology to reach out to customers that have actually raised their hands, say, I'm interested in your product and service. So, so that because I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add to that.
No, I think that's perfect in terms of, intent is really important. So if you're going to have consent, you're going to have intent. Yeah. And we obviously want high value consumers that are interested in getting jobs done at Angi. So I think you hit it on the head there.
It's often forgotten, right? Yeah.
And from the standpoint of defending lawsuits, such golden tickets or be golden, for the purpose of trying to defeat class, and there could be a situation where somebody fell through the cracks. The golden ticket, wasn't correct. But then you have the argument that the putative or the potential class members have to be analyzed on a class member by class member basis, which makes it much more difficult, even impossible if you can establish that to get class certification. This drives down the cost of the case immensely. You probably, in all likelihood, pay a lower premium to settle it on an individual basis. So when I heard about this as we were planning our presentation, I was extremely impressed. And the golden ticket sounds definitely golden.
Yeah, and so our clients ask us all the time, how do we get started, right? We'd love to start building a more compliant customer acquisition strategy. At ActiveProspect, we have what's called the TCPA Bulletproof Stack. We are not married to that name. We're working on it. But it does a few things, right? So as a data lead comes in, you document consent using trusted form, have a video replay to back up your ability to contact that consumer. We scrub it against known litigator lists, such as Blacklist Alliance and DNC.com. We run it through Anura to make sure it's not a fraudulent and bought lead. And last but not least, we make sure that the phone number matches the name on the record. It looks like you were.
I didn't interrupt you.
No, please.
I'm sorry. I think working on the name is a good idea, because nothing is absolutely bulletproof.
Exactly. Yeah.
I settled a case just recently, down in Atlanta, Georgia, filed in Atlanta. This was a debt collector. Debt collector. The allegation was that they made a pre-recorded call, and the client was just livid because they don't do that. And so they have this process, but even that process was not bulletproof. But nonetheless, the case settled for, it settled for 4 figures. And so that the very fact that you had, and the client said, no, we don't do recorded phone calls. And they came back, and I said that to plaintiff's counsel, and he says, well, I believe my client instead of your client. That's fine. How about giving me the recording? Oh, don't have the recording. Suddenly things became different, and at that point we did settle it for, in TCPA terms, in litigation of all kind of terms, chump change.
Absolutely. And just to reiterate on that point, when it's a dispute based on a customer saying, hey, I didn't give you consent, and an advertiser contacting them, it's the burden of proof lies on the party making the call, correct?
Say that, I'm sorry.
The burden of proof to say, I documented express written consent, that lies on the party making the call.
Right, right, yes, absolutely.
I kind of led you there.
No, thank you, that was good. I was a little slow, needed careful leading,
Yeah,
but thank you. No, you're absolutely right.
Absolutely.
That's 100%.
So probably the most layman person in this room is probably me on this subject. So a quick question, are those TCPA regulations and compliance, are those moving targets? Or is this pretty straightforward?
No, I would say that it's evolving.
Yes.
Moving target, perhaps not running around.
Okay.
But it is evolving, certainly. And it's certainly not going to go away.
Right.
You and I had a conversation, Kevin and I had a conversation before, just this morning, and I talked about these verdicts and these settlements. Would there be possibility to get legislation to make it less likely that these verdicts would happen in the future? And I said, I mean, my son's in politics, I'm not, but what do I know? But there's really not going to be a constituency for people to make it easier for people to make, and the argument's going to be for people to make robocalls. Who is going to defend robocallers? I get them all the time. I'm on the verge of retiring so I can file TCPA lawsuits. But that if I stayed in business, it would be bad.
That's some inside baseball right there. That's
there would
for
be
sure.
some inside baseball.
Yeah.
But in any event, it's evolving, but slowly, and it's never going to go away.
Obviously, so companies like Young's would certainly help companies navigate that world for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think Steve mentioned, bulletproof might not be the right, it's risk mitigation, right?
That's a good word.
It's mitigation, it's building a defensible TCPA position, it is having a process in place, yeah, it's all of those things.
Great. I actually wrote down some notes as this was happening. So I have some key takeaways here, and then we're going to get to a Q&A. So if you have a question, raise your hand, I'll call on you, and then please just ask whomever up on the stage you feel is most applicable to that question. My first takeaway, though, goes to what Stephen was talking about. He showed us that consequences of noncompliance are real, and they exist, and they are serious, and we need to take them seriously. Number two, the language of consent is certainly the foundation of compliance. It needs to be clear, direct, and at the center of communications. And I think we could take that away as well. And number three, to scale your business, you must start with documenting express written consent and tools such as Trusted Form, right? Young, make that much more manageable. My three takeaways from a guy that doesn't know very much about this, but tries to. That's for sure.
I just want to add one thing to that.
Yeah.
Just on the upside, right? I mean, we talked about it earlier. A compliant lead is a good lead. It's somebody who is actually raising their hand to be sold. So, let's not. It's not all downside. There's tremendous upside to be had by focusing on compliance.
I think that's a very good point. Both you make that point really well. That it's not just that you have the unfortunate circumstance of not having to deal with me in litigation. I have the unfortunate circumstance, but it's good for your business, and I like the line. A compliant lead is a good lead. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think transparency is everything in trying to get as transparent as possible with consumers, if there's another end consumer or whoever you're dealing with.
That's great. Thank you all for your time. Any questions from the audience? The gentleman with the blue mask, right?
Yeah. If you have express written consent, does it expire?
No.
Open-ended, call me
Unless the person changes and says, gives consent and then withdraws it down the road, but it's absent that, it doesn't have a life, it doesn't die on the shelf, so to speak.
But along that one, do they have to
we need to hear the questions.
I'm sorry, I'll repeat the questions. The first question was, does written consent expire? And the answer was no, unless there's some change in that. Next question.
So if you have written consent,
Yeah.
and then they go in and they sign up again for Do Not Disturb, they don't necessarily contact you, but they then go and do everything they can.
So. they
Repeat
give
the
you-
question back a little bit, Stephen, if you could.
If you have express written consent, and down the road, the person withdraws it, gets on the do not call list, where are you? I think that, I haven't confronted that situation. I would tend to think that that would be a violation. I also think that that is the stuff of which $500 Tcpa lawsuits are made, individual, not intentional claims.
I just, if you don't mind, I'm going to chime in real
Go ahead.
quick. Steve, I've heard differing opinions on the duration of the ability to contact the consumer using automated dialers and text messaging. I've heard various timeframes, right? I've heard 90 days as being a good rule of thumb. So it does seem like there is some disagreement when it comes to how long that express written consent is valid for. But obviously, this is your realm.
Well, I would freely admit I haven't, as I said before, litigated that issue. I think it comes back to more I just don't believe it's automatically going to expire. And
that might be under the EDR rule, with the 90 days, talking about if you don't have written consent. I'm not an attorney.
but if you'd like to become one,
You had a question, sir?
So the trust informed tool, right?
Yeah.
Do you need that tool? You're not doing auto dialing.
Could you repeat the question, too?
Yeah, do you need trusted form if you're not using an auto dialer? Now, I'll let Stephen kind of answer that, but I'm basically, the way I look at it is by documenting express written consent, that is your ability, you are documenting the consumer's wishes to be contacted about your product. Now, the definitions have narrowed, and I would consult with legal counsel in order to define what they view your risks are. But the interpretations of what is under certain categories is constantly being ruled in different directions, in my opinion. So I would just consult with your legal counsel on what to do there. But as a rule of thumb, if you're going to be contacting the consumer using phone or text, you should have a store of documentation, just as out of respect for that consumer. Yeah.
Sir?
So to answer your question, what defines express written consent? Mr. Eric Troutman just explained the exact,
the gentleman in the very dapper hat.
Yes.
and at times a little scary hat, but speak up. Give them the answer, Eric.
You don't have to yell it.
It's very specific. 9 work tests to the CFR, 47 CFR, 4,1200 A subtotal. We'll have everything you need for the person you have to have. And it's not optional. It's tick that, it's not included, it's not like,
Yeah.
No. The FTC have very, very, very
Yeah.
So, to track down the subsections would be a bit difficult, but the point is you have to comply precisely, and it comes back to the more general issue of precise compliance. They say use a 2.5 pencil, use a 2.5 pencil. Good.
Yes, sir.
Currently, no. We are at the point of the lead acquisition, but stay tuned. We are working on it.
Could you repeat that question now? So people
Yeah,
can-
so he asked if a consumer opted in, but then later revoked their authorization, do we have a mechanism for kind of documenting that or keeping track of that? Yeah, so we do have tools within our platform to help you automate list management using suppression list or whatnot. But there are other mechanisms for that. But yes, we can talk about that afterwards. If, yeah.
Sir?
Just out of curiosity, because Steve, you mentioned that a couple of different times. Are there any particular industries or verticals that are kind of on the top 3 target list of professional litigators and whatnot?
Well, I would say I, over the years, have defended very many debt collectors. That's evolving, but that's why I made those reference. I would say debt collectors is a target industry. I think your all's industry is a target industry. If you're in the business of contacting people, even with consent, let's say it differently. I think about the case I've made reference to. If you're making cold calls to potential clients, then that's going to be an industry in which that happens is going to be a target industry. As I think about this, I think the real estate industry is nearly all the rage for TCPA litigation because the agents make phone calls. The days of agents selling their houses to people, for people they know, is, I think, passing. The successful agents are working the phones to trying to get leads all of the time. They're going to be working, you have the, help me out here, MLS? No,
Yeah, the
that's the
MLS.
soccer list. Chillo, yes, you got it. But and somebody's on the list, the house is up for sale, and then it drops off. This is a target audience for real estate agents, and they're going to be contacting them all the time to say, Mr. Turner, I see your house was up for sale, it's gone off. Here I am, I'd be love to help you out if you're still interested in selling. And there could be lots of reasons why that would be a bad call and a violation of the TCPA. So that's a target industry, debt collectors, and I think you all. But because of you're contacting people, not at random, but so often unsolicited.
Yeah,
not always, but occasionally, I'd say.
Just to unpack that, to make sure people didn't miss that. So you list your home comes off market, an agent calls you, and boom, you can say, hey, you made a big mistake. I did not give you express written consent to call me. So that's to me, that's wild. I mean, that's like, it seems so obvious that could be done, but
It seems really obvious it could be done, but if you're on the do not call list, and in this world we live in today, I've had a case with a plaintiff who was a serial, let's tell it like it is, offender, who did just that, house was listed, went off, he was on the do not call list, got contacted, and you're off to the races.
With my luck, I'd be the agent that calls Steven's house when it comes off the market and get that unfortunate, you made a mistake calling this number kind of thing. Any additional questions that we have out there?
Yeah, one more.
Please go ahead.
a couple more.
Trust advisor, real quick. How do you deal with a lot of leads coming in from different lead sources to a lot of landing pages?
Yeah, so,
Leads coming in from all different landing pages.
yeah, so the traffic or host and post in this, or both in this situation. So you're saying leads that you're purchasing, data leads you're purchasing from third parties?
Well, no, like I'm talking about driving leads from YouTube or AdWords, and they're coming right into our landing pages.
Oh yeah, so I mean, as far as the structure of how it works, it's a small piece of JavaScript. It takes maybe 5 minutes to implement, and it just sits in the background documenting that express written consent. And The mechanism, it's actually a URL that travels with that lead, and it's just like any other data field, like their name, it's their trusted form certificate, and that gives you the... Oh, yeah, I mean, we process billions of leads, yeah, so...
They work with Angi, so they're processing a lot of leads, I can promise you that.
Gentleman in the back there, Kim.
So have you seen much enforcement action at the state level? We talked a lot about that, there was books on that, but have you seen much enforcement action at the state level, really regarding a lot of the state type issues, or is it still mostly contract?
I have not seen much at the state level for its individual litigation. I think that may be changing in Florida. Florida has its own state statute now. You're dealing with the Tcpa. I think you'd have to find some other violation, certainly in California, that I'm familiar with, to find out how to get state enforcement involved. The Tcpa being a federal statute. I haven't encountered it.
Any other, one more question, sir.
Two more.
Mr. Young, does your company have any plans to make your product available to small business space? Because I've contacted a company before and it's priced out of money.
Yeah, well, first of all, yes, we are very mindful that compliance shouldn't be outside the reach of any customer who wants to do it. We're actively working to make that possible, so please bring that up. I'm happy to discuss afterwards.
Oh, you, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll just repeat the question so everyone
the
can
question.
hear it. If I'm understanding you correctly, you're transitioning from direct mail, so you have these lists of direct mail, and you have enough information, you have their phone number, so you're looking to potentially do outreach via text.
My clients actually approaching a lot of these skip tracing companies, they're in real estate, and I don't know that a lot of them are compliant. I want to give them the right data, ask the right questions to the vendor.
So, if I understand this correctly, and I may not, so your clients, they have data, and they want to know if they can text the people to track down. They've skip tracing someone to do with real estate transaction. And the question would then be, what do you have to do to comply?
I would go back to the kind of the three tips that Stephen mentioned earlier. So when you don't have prior express written consent, you must follow it, right? Follow it to the T, train your staff, and what was the third one? DNC. DNC list.
So I had a case, this case I told you about in Missouri, in which texts were sent, and arguably they had consent, so that wasn't the issue. But I will use my not all that clever example. It was as if they used a 2.5 pencil when they should have used a 2.0 pencil. There was language arguably that wasn't included in the text, which got the client into serious big trouble. I hope that responded.
So I think that's all we have time for in questions, but they've made themselves available at the back side of the room because be respectful of everybody's time.
And if it's more appropriate, I can go out in the hallway, we can go in the hallway.
Absolutely, we could do that. And so I want to thank absolutely Kelly, Stephen, Young, great job. Go by the ActiveProspect booth, go by the EverConnect booth, go see some people and talk to them.